Uninvisible is a support podcast that provides information, ideas, suggestions, and experiences that deal squarely with medical issues that present unique advocacy issues for individuals. We do not provide medical advice of any kind. We do provide support, concepts, ideas, discussions, and information you can use to make sure that you are being heard and that your concerns are being addressed. Please consult with your physician for any medical issue that you are facing, but we will be here for you along your journey. We welcome all comments about our episodes and, of course, the correction of any errors. Information and comments that you send to us are governed by our terms of service and privacy policy, which are available on our website, located at www.uninvisiblepod.com. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and are not necessarily the opinion of Uninvisible or the show sponsors. Most of all, we welcome your stories and experiences to share with our community, because without you, this community and the benefit it offers all of us would not exist. Any advertising that you may hear is accepted without regard to our editorial content. Of course, in the event that you are having a medical emergency of any kind, consult your physician or emergency services. Welcome to Uninvisible. I'm your host, Lauren Friedman, and I'm here with my guests to bring you info, insights, and inspiration for coping with, diagnosing, and treating invisible illness. We're here oversharing, so you don't have to struggle with invisibility anymore. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm here with Lara Bloom, who is the executive director of the Ehlers-Danlos Society, which is an organization that's in the UK and the US. And we're here to talk about Ehlers-Danlos and hypermobility disorders. So, Lara, thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I guess we're going to start with the basics because you yourself live with Ehlers-Danlos. And I was wondering if you could tell us when and how you first realized that you had it going on.
Yeah, so I have the kind of standard story of a long journey to diagnosis that we hear about so often wherever you are in the world, actually. It doesn't seem to be better in the US or UK, or it's just everywhere. Is an average diagnosis of about 12 years. And that was my experience too. So I was finally diagnosed when I was 24 years old, after about 13 surgeries, fracturing my wrist multiple times, being told I was a hypochondriac, it was all in my head, and the usual experience that people had. I think that my symptoms probably first started in a way that I felt like it wasn't usual around the age of 11. Look back at my earlier childhood, there are some other odd things, but on a conscious level of I don't feel like my friends seem to feel, it was around 11. I was always tired. It was hard to keep up. I fractured my wrists really easily. It was the same kind of bone areas. So actually within EDS, your bones with the hypermobile type aren't fragile, but the tissues and all the connective tissues around it were very lax and injured with mine. So it made fracturing much more easy. And that's why there were so many of them. And I now have my wrists fused, and thankfully they've been great ever since. But all of that happened without me knowing my diagnosis. Even when they were fused, they didn't know what was wrong. And to me, it's saying that you've got an 18, 19-year-old girl in front of you that's had 20-something fractures, and no one was looking into why that could be. They were just like, yeah, well, all the tissues around it aren't really there anymore. They're so, torn and everything else. So we'll just fuse them. And it worked great. But now knowing what I know, that's just unacceptable to me, that kind of thing they don't look at it on a multi-systemic level. Everything is looked at in silos, which I think is one of the reasons why EDS is so often missed. But it's the multi-systemic nature. It's the fact that the pain is everywhere. It's non-specific things. So it's fatigue, chronic widespread pain. I was diagnosed with basal vagal syncope before having EDS, again, because I'd pass out. I'd randomly throw up and feel really dizzy and clammy and sick. And then they diagnosed me with that. And I had endometriosis, I had polycystic ovaries, I had bladder issues, but no one ever looked at it all together. It was like, oh, you've got that and you've also got that, so we'll treat that. And it wasn't until a dietitian finally sat down with me because I wasn't putting on weight, but I had very high cholesterol. So I went to see a dietitian if, there was something I could do to put on weight but not increase my cholesterol. And for the first time ever, someone sat down and said, we think that you might have Marfan syndrome. Actually, that's what they thought I had. And so I finally referred to a geneticist, and that's when I was told that I had hypermobile UVF.
Wow. So it's been quite a journey. Do you find also, because you work with a lot of patients and, with EDS research, are you finding that there's a difference in the timeline between when women get diagnosed and when men get diagnosed as well?
Unfortunately, there's not enough men to really see a true consistency, because there's so many more women diagnosed than men. Lots of anecdotal explanations as to why that is. Could be hormones, which to me makes the most sense. It could be that men go to the doctor less than women, which I think is a little bit sexist in some ways, but it could be true. The fact that there's more women on social media learning about their health than men. But these are all kind of social observations, and one that's never actually been researched and understood fully. And it came up as actually a research priority when we worked with the Comorbidity Coalition at the Society. And looking into the hormones and the prevalence in women was something that was a high priority, and something that I hope that we will carry out soon. So I think you see a similar journey from what I've seen, but you certainly have a very skewed female population.
Wow, really interesting. So you mentioned a little bit about, fusion surgery and various things that you've done since your diagnosis, and even before it, to control your symptoms. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you've managed your symptoms since the diagnosis in particular?
Well, since the diagnosis, I've managed it very differently. I think as human beings, we are taught and we instinctively think that when there's something wrong, there's a surgery or there's a pill to fix it, because that's what society tells us. So growing up, there's a problem, you go to a doctor, and more often than not, they offer some kind of surgery to fix it. So, for example, before I was diagnosed, I had my knees operated twice, both at the same time.
Wow.
And totally crippled, unable. I had to, on one of them, I felt like I had to learn to walk again. I mean, it was so inappropriate to be done. But there's a doctor telling you that will fix it, and you don't know any better, and it hurts, so you do it. And I was 15 at the time. And my right leg rotates 40 degrees in. And my whole life I'd gone to doctors about how much this hurt, and the pain in my hip and the pain in my knee. And what should have been done is, when I was a child, I should have had something called a femoral osteotomy, which is to break the bone up in the thigh and to realign it so that it's straight and it relieves the pressure on the hip and the other joints. But it was never me. And instead, a orthopedic surgeon got frustrated with me, constantly saying, I'm in pain and I think it's because of my leg rotation, because that makes sense to me. And said, well, I disagree. I think the knee surgery we did was the right thing, but to prove to you, we're going to put you in traction for 2 weeks. And they hung me from the ceiling, were the words he used, to prove to me that it wasn't because of the rotation. So they literally hung me from the ceiling in traction at a very young age.
Wow.
To prove to me that wasn't the cause of my pain. After now, I've seen 3 different specialists to get second opinions who all say I should have had a femoral osteotomy and still want me to have one, because that's now caused a labral tear, a glute tear, and lots of other problems that have happened in my leg. So real frustration that I had surgeries I shouldn't have had, and I didn't get the surgeries maybe I should have had. And so as an adult, that's lessened my quality of life with that leg. And that's frustrating. And I've had 2 ankle surgeries, which now, again, I wish I knew what I know now, because I would never have had the first one, because it was to fix a torn tendon. As soon as I heal, or again, and it's torn now, and I'm walking around with a torn tendon. And I won't have the surgery because A, you heal poorly, and B, I've got a connective tissue condition, so it's just going to tear again. And I think that people have these surgeries that make them worse, not better. And there's not that education and understanding, and knowledge is power at the end of the day. And I never take for granted how lucky I am to know
Thank you so much for tuning in. For the full episode, click the link below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to access future episodes. Turn on those notifications. Share this video if you enjoyed it, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at UninvisiblePod.